Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to go over what the Toronto Maple Leafs did at this year's trade deadline. And I want to start with the Maple Leafs acquiring Brandon Carlo from the Boston Bruins, a big right-handed defenseman. Now, they do have to give up Fraser Minton, who's one of their better prospects drafted in the second round a couple of years ago, a first-round pick as well as the fourth-round pick. So a pretty steep price here, but I think as you guys will see as we get into some of the nitty-gritty numbers, Brandon Carlo's a hell of a player. He's 28 years old. He shoots right-handed. He's 6'5" and almost 220 pounds. And he signed for not just this season, not just next season, but the season after that as well. $4.1 million. The Bruins actually retained 15%, so the Maple Leafs will get him for 3 playoff runs at a cap hit, a shade under $3.5 million. And that's part of the reason why the price tag to acquire Carlo was so high, right? You have to give up a first, Fraser Minton, one of the Leafs' top prospects, and a fourth-round pick. Yeah, that's a lot, but at the same time, you're getting a quality top 4 right-handed shooting, massive 6'5", 220-pound defenseman that plays disgustingly difficult minutes up against the other team's best players and does that effectively. Oh yeah, and he also is coming at $3.5 million a season for the next 3 playoff runs. That is insane, insane value. So one, you're paying for the quality of the player, but also two, you're paying for that value there. You know, we talked about just how good the Jake McCabe trade has been for the Maple Leafs for a number of seasons now and how good it is even now because he's still making just $2 million. The Blackhawks retained to make him a $2 million player from a $4 million player. The Leafs have had him for 3 playoff runs, and that's going to be the same with Brandon Carlo. He's going to be here for this year and 2 more playoff runs after this one. He's just 28 years old. He's in the prime of his career. Let's take a look at some more in-depth numbers here. I'm really excited about this player. If we come on over to puckiq.com here and we're taking a look at the Bruins and how they've used their defensemen this season, Brandon Carlo is 3rd in terms of the percentage of his ice time that he spent playing up against the other team's best players, but he's far and away played the most defensive zone starts on the Bruins blue line this season. It is disgusting, the level of competition that this guy goes up against on a nightly basis. Just how disgusting? Well, he's played the 29th highest percentage of his ice time up against the other team's best players, minimum 250 minutes in the entire NHL this season, and nobody, not one soul that has played more minutes up against the other team's best players plays more in the defensive zone than Brandon Carlo. The only other guys that come close are Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev. You want to talk about shutdown defense? The Toronto Maple Leafs will tell you a couple of things about shutdown defense. If we come on over to all 3 zones here and we're looking at the micro stats, I'm beaming. I'm bouncing absolutely all over the place here. And I'm excited just looking at the chart. I can't imagine how excited I'm going to be when I'm actually watching the games with this absolute monster playing for the Maple Leafs on their blue line, because he's a really effective player in his own zone, defending in front of his net, but he's also a very good player at defending off the rush up against the other team's best players, protecting the blue line. And if the Maple Leafs already have Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev playing on one of the better shutdown pairings in the NHL this season, well, then that leaves Brandon Carlo to play behind them in easier minutes, which means these numbers should go up. Or if there's an injury like we've had to Chris Tanev over the last couple of games, he just slots right in there and you're not missing a beat. This is how you pull off a trade. This is depth. This is quality. This is just awesome. Now, Carlo's most common D partner this season has been Hampus Lindholm, and if we're looking at Brandon Carlo with and without Hampus Lindholm this season at 5-on-5, there's a real stark difference here in the numbers. Yeah, Hampus Lindholm is a really, really good player. He's played some of the most difficult minutes in the entire NHL this season. He's a fantastic defender. But when you're looking at the rest of the Bruins blue line, you know, Carlo's had like 5 other partners ever since Hampus Lindholm has gone down with an injury, from Jordan Osterley to Mason Lowry to Nikita Zadorov, and it's not the same, right? So if you're pairing Brandon Carlo with somebody like Morgan Rielly, you know, who will not be playing these heavy shutdown defensive minutes here, the role for Carlo gets a little bit easier. And all he's got to do is be what Morgan Riley isn't. And that's just himself, really, on the ice. He's got to defend the blue line. He's got to defend in front of his own net. And he'll be fine. So we're looking at the Maple Leafs blue line here after the trade deadline. Like we mentioned, Jake McCabe, Chris Tanev, already one of the better shutdown pairings in the entire NHL this season. Morgan Riley, Brandon Carlo, all they got to do is fill the gaps for each other there and be what the other isn't. And I think that that's really easy to do, right? Because the expectations, the role, everything is defined. You already know that guy's going to be there. I'm going to be here. It's real easy to do that. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is going to be on the third pair now, right? That's where he was most successful with the Florida Panthers last year when they won the Stanley Cup. This move is just, it's awesome. It's depth for Chris Tanev if he gets hurt, but it also pushes Oliver Ekman-Larsson down in the lineup. And that's just something that they've needed, right? They can't have him playing 22, 23, 24 minutes a night. And it's not that he's been bad. It's just that you're asking him to do too much there, right? Now, he could be sneaky good on that third pair, either with Philip Myers playing on his strong side on the left side, or you bring in Simone Benoit and Oliver Ekman-Larsson plays on his offside there. You know, I'm 27 years old, and in my entire lifetime, the Maple Leafs have never had good right-handed shooting defensemen. It's just been something that has escaped them. But in the last 12 months or so, they've probably acquired the two best guys that they've had in my entire lifetime. But I jumped the gun a little bit there to talk about Carlo first. But earlier in the day, the Maple Leafs acquire center Scott Laughton from the Philadelphia Flyers, and they have to give up Nikita Gorbenkin and a first-round pick to do it. They also give back a fourth and a sixth, and I believe they flipped one of those picks to the Bruins in the Brandon Carlo deal. But let's talk about Scott Laughton. Scott Laughton is 30, turning 31 years old, and the Oakville, Ontario native is signed for this season and next season at $3 million. But that's not the number that the Maple Leafs are going to be paying him, because the Flyers held on to 50% of his salary in this deal. So he'll only count for $1.5 million against the Maple Leafs cap this season, and next year he's on pace for 15 goals and 37 points. So that's it, right? The Maple Leafs went out and acquired a massive right-handed shooting top four defenseman and a third-line center. They plugged the obvious gaping holes in their roster, and now we're ready to rock, right? Well, not really. There's a little bit of an elephant in the room here, and that's that two of Scott Laughton's coaches, both Alain Vigneault with the Flyers and John Tortorella most recently, have kind of made it clear that they prefer Scott Laughton on the wing rather than up the middle. And if we're looking at the numbers, and it's not a small sample size, it's since the 2018-2019 season, Scott Laughton has produced better results when playing on the wing rather than up the middle. The Philadelphia Flyers have been doing something really interesting over the last couple of weeks or so, ever since the Four Nations tournament ended. They shifted full gears into trade deadline mode, and they've been trying to really showcase the players that they were looking to trade at this year's deadline. Guys like Rasmus Ristolainen were getting power play minutes for them. Scott Laughton was sneaking in there on their second unit, and they put together this line of Andrei Kuzmenko, Scott Laughton, and Travis Konecny. So their best player with two guys that they traded yesterday. So they've been obviously trying to prop those guys up and show them off. But in taking a closer look at the numbers here, not only did they play Laughton down the middle and with their best player to pump up his value, but they also played him in a more offensive role. Mind you, in a limited sample here, and they did get outscored 2-1, but they also controlled the vast majority of the quality of scoring opportunities when this line was out there. But that doesn't really change my opinion on Scott Laughton. You know, in the first video that we did, we determined that he was kind of, sort of, not really a center. And what I mean by that, and maybe I should have clarified in that video, is that he's not driving results all by himself. He's going to need some help on the wings when he is out there lined up down the middle. You know, defensively, he's going to get in and do the nitty-gritty things that other guys just don't want to do. And offensively, this is a player that is still capable, and that's why he's on pace for 15 goals and 37 points this season, right? He's going to generate rebounds, he's going to go to the net, and he's an okay playmaker as well. If we're taking a look at the Maple Leafs forward group here, there's a couple of different ways that they can orient things. If they want to spread it out over the course of three lines, they can put Max Domi with Austin Matthews, but Some people may say Max Domi doesn't really deserve that because he hasn't played very well this season. Um, Regardless of who he's playing with, whether it's up the middle, on the wing, with Matthews, without Matthews, he hasn't been able to find a home this year. So maybe that's not something that you're willing to do, but playing him there allows you to play William Nylander with Scott Laughton. It allows you to replicate sort of what the Flyers did with Travis Konecny and Andrei Kuzmenko, having Nick Robertson here, another a very offensively minded player. And it allows you to have more of a shutdown line here with John Tavares and Mitch Marner. And sneaky, looking at the numbers for John Tavares and William Nylander over the last like 20 games or so, they have not been good together. There's something rotten there. I don't like that combination. I've never liked that combination. I don't want to see it down the stretch, and I don't want to see it in the playoffs. So I like the combination of John Tavares with Mitch Marner there. If you want to bump Max Domi out of that top six role because you think he doesn't deserve it, I'm fully with you there. Maybe they can try something out like this, and if this third line isn't really going, you can always try something like that as well. In my previous video, I tried to show off how much flexibility and how much cap space the Maple Leafs really had to work with at this year's deadline. It just involved moving on from some of the players who have really been giving them almost nothing this year. Guys, and I'm sorry, guys like Ryan Reeves and Connor Dewar and Connor Timmins, Dakota Marmis they just sent down. Max Pacioretty has had a real up and down season. They placed him on LTIR, and boom, you free up $5 million, just like we talked about, and you're able to bring in Scott Laughton and Brandon Carlo, and you plug the holes on this team. A guy like Brandon Carlo is going to be here for 3 playoff runs, and Scott Laughton, his contract ends at the end of next season, and I'm jumping ahead here, but he's from the area. He's ecstatic to be a Maple Leaf, and if it goes well, probably ends up sticking around. So if you're looking at having Carlo for 3 playoff runs, if Scott Laughton ends up sticking around, you're looking at the first round picks and even Fraser Minton, and you're like, these guys can help us win now. And that's what matters, right? Those first round picks, Fraser Minton, when are those going to help the Maple Leafs? Fraser Minton could be on the team next season, but there's still going to be training wheels on that player. Those first round picks, from 2026 and 2027, they're not going to be making an impact for this team for another 4 or 5 years. And at that point, Matthews is going to need a new contract, right? The competitive window for this team is right now. They have one of the better goaltenders in the NHL right now in Anthony Stolarz. They have one of the better shutdown pairings in Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev right now. What are assets 4 or 5 years down the road really going to do for you? If I had to give the Maple Leafs a letter grade, it's an A-. And the only reason why it's not an A+ is, and I'm being picky here, in the previous video I said, if you're looking at this left side here, they could have used another winger. And that was only if there was a little bit of extra space left over. And, I guess they look at a guy like Nick Robertson. They want to give him that opportunity, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So A-. But what do you guys think of what the Maple Leafs did at this year's trade deadline? Do you like Brandon Carlo? Do you like Scott Laughton? Do you think they gave up too much? Let me know down in the comments section below. Make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more because more will be on the way. And guys, I'll see you again in the next one.